All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to basically EMS Lights and Stories. We are joined by Yanire again, our girl Yanire. Real
What's
excited.
up?
So yeah, let's just jump into it. You said you got a story to share, so let's hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll preface this by saying that since I started in EMS, I have had probably an irrational fear of bed bugs.
Okay.
Okay,
As
so
most of us do.
as
Yeah,
most
for
people
sure.
do, right? Yeah, I mean, most people don't want to get bed bugs.
Yeah,
So since I've started working in EMS, had this fear of getting bed bugs, right? So flash forward, I'm probably a couple months out of my FTO, brand new EMT, right? This is my first job in EMS. I haven't had to encounter anything that crazy before, right? So I'm working with Allie, who, if you've watched any of these other podcasts,
She's been on a couple times now.
She's been
Yeah.
on a couple times, right?
Yeah.
She's my bestie. Anyway, my first time working with Allie, and everyone who knows Allie, initially she can kind of come off as a little distant. You know what I mean? You got to kind of warm up to her. It takes a little while, right? So this is our first shift working together.
Okay.
And I'm gung ho. I'm just happy to be there. And she's like, all right, simmer down here. Let's go slow with this, right? So this is our first shift together. We're at a pretty busy station. I don't know if you're familiar, Medic 2-1, right? We run a ton of calls.
So
It's a
the
pretty
busiest
central,
station in the state of Idaho.
Yes, yeah. And it's a central area of Boise. So you're running downtown, you're running, Boise area, you go all over, Garden City, right? Mm-hmm. So we're doing our thing. It's I came in for a back half. I think we had left the station to go get gas off of Barrister, right? So we're driving on, and we're going down, and I see this kind of older gentleman, probably in his 60s, 70s, right? He's just kind of walking along the road, and he just looks, that feeling when you you get kind of that tingling sensation in the back of your your mind, and you're I just feel like something's gonna happen with you today.
Uh-huh.
It's just weird, right? Because he's walking, he's doing, who knows? He's probably just out for a walk, right?
Yeah.
I don't know this guy, I've never seen him before, but I just had this feeling when we drove by him. I was I feel like something is gonna happen with you, right? So we go get gas. We come back the same way we came, and he's still walking, but this time he's just standing there, just looking at the ground, and I look over at Allie, and I'm Allie, I feel like we're going to come back for this guy. And I don't know for what, but I just feel like we're coming back for him. And she's okay, way to put those bad juju vibes out there. And I was no, hear me out. I feel like something's going on with him. She's okay, well, we're not stopping right now to check. Yeah. And I'm okay, that's fair. We'll wait. So we get back to the station. I think maybe 2-3 hours later, we get dispatched to a fall victim. We get dispatched with an engine. We get there before the engine does. So we pull up, somebody's waving us down. They're he's over here. We're okay. Pull up, sure as crap. I walk out, and there's the guy laying on the ground. And I'm Allie, I told you, it's the guy. She's okay, whatever. You called it. So we get out. He's laying on the ground. He's awake. I walk up to him, my best EMT gung-ho impression. I'm what's going on? My name's EMT Nide. How can we help you today? Do you just want some help up, right? Are you hurt anywhere? I'm doing my assessments, right? Any neck pain, anything like that. He's no, I'm fine. I just need help up. And I'm okay. I'm not familiar with this patient. Allie says she's not familiar with him either.
Okay. He's
However,
a known patient.
It sounds like he's a known patient.
Okay.
We don't find this out till our engine gets there. Of course, we're the first ones on scene. So Allie's do you just want some help up? And he's yeah, that'd be great. So she stands behind him. I'm standing in front of him, kind of holding onto his hands. We get him up onto his feet. Just generally speaking, you can tell he's doesn't really take great care of himself, right? Mm-hmm. He says he lives in these apartments that we're right adjacent to, right? So he lives in this apartment complex. We're asking him, what's going on? He's oh, I just was out and about for a walk. Sounds based on bystander reports, he'd been out and about walking around for in circles for hours, right? So I don't know what his history is, right? Anyway, he's I was do you want to go to the hospital? Are you hurting anywhere? And he's no, I'd prefer not to go. I was there earlier this morning. And I was oh, okay. That's what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
I was okay, that's fine. Do you just want assistance back to your apartment? He's yeah. Fire gets there. They're standing there. The captain goes and talks to Allie, and it's me and just the two other firefighters. And I'm still chatting it up with this guy, and I'm giving him a friendly little pat on the shoulder, right? I'm not thinking about anything. I'm I just think I'm being nice, right? All of a sudden, I'm looking at the patient. Allie's standing behind the patient, facing me. and she's mouthing something to me. And I'm like, what is she mouthing? She just keeps mouthing. And I'm like, looking at her like, what? Like trying not to distract the patient because I'm still in conversation with him, right? But then I'm also trying to figure out what it is that she's so like urgently mouthing to me. And finally, like just barely above a whisper so I can hear her, she says, bed bugs. And I mean, the visceral reaction that I had was outstanding. I mean, the way she describes it, I feel like I blacked out in that moment, but the way she describes it is pretty incredible. I mean, I just remember basically her saying that, and I just immediately, like, everything just kind of went black, and I was like, oh my God. Like, I've been touching this patient. Which... it's a part of EMS, right? Like, you're going to get bed bugs. Like, it happens, right? But for me, this was kind of like a life or death moment for me, which tells you how dramatic.
This is a new thing for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I didn't want to have to deal with bed bugs that night, okay? Like, I just wanted to work and be done with it, right? So I'm having a visceral reaction, and I don't know why, right? I don't know why this is my first thought, but the first thing I do is I, like, take my hands, and I'm, like, looking at them, and I just go to, like, I think grab my hair and put it behind.
Worst idea.
And as I'm doing this, she looks at me, she's like, stop it. Stop doing that. No, don't touch yourself. And I'm like, oh, God. And she's just like, what are you doing with your hands? Just stop moving. Yeah. And I was like, right. Okay. Like, I mean, it's like I just literally had like just a blank moment where I wasn't even thinking about anything anymore. It was like survival of the fittest. I was like, this is it for me. Yeah, this is my time. Yeah.
Fight or flight just like
literally.
Kicked in.
Yeah. And it was more like, I'm just going to stand here and not know what to do with myself. Yeah. So eventually we helped this guy back into his apartment. Fire crew leaves. Meanwhile, they were laughing at me about this because they're like, oh, gosh.
Deservedly so.
It's your first day. Like, I was like, kind of. It's like 6 months on the job. Like, yeah. And so we get back to the ambulance, and I'm like quite literally on the verge of tears. And if another thing to know about Allie, she hates crying, is incredibly uncomfortable with it. And so I start tearing up, and she's looking at me, and she's like, don't you do it. Don't you start crying. Don't do it. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And she goes and grabs the alcohol bottle, and I'm like, just spray me down. Just spray everything. Like, I'm talking head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Like, we are getting everything sprayed with alcohol because I am not getting bed bugs. And mind you, nothing really touched them besides my gloved hands, right? Yeah. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe my coat sleeve.
In that second, just a whole, like, a family of bed bugs just jumped right onto you. Yeah.
And I'm just visualizing these tiny little creatures crawling up my arms. You start itching everywhere, right? I'm like, this is it for me. Like, I'm really going to, like, lose it over this. Not necessary, right? Completely unnecessary reaction. But in my mind, this was like life or death. We get back to the station. The supervisor's there. We walk in. She's explaining this whole story to him. He's like, you're probably fine. I wouldn't worry about it. If there is something that you need to be concerned about, just put your clothes in the wash and just go out of service, right? It's not the end of the world, right? Like, I haven't even laid down in my bed yet. So at least that's, like, safe, right?
Clean, safe, yeah.
So anyway, needless to say, I sprayed myself down, like, unceremoniously with like a ton of alcohol. Like, I'm talking, I probably used up half the bottle. And Allie did so. She did as well because she was like, well, now I touched him, so now I have to as well. But she didn't have quite the visceral reaction that I did. But that was my bed bug story. And I will say, since then, I have not, knock on wood, because I'm not about to jinx myself, I have not had bed bugs once.
Okay. Like a bed bug patient, or you haven't like had an exposure? Or?
Well, bed bug patient could be subjective because I don't know if I actually have or not. I'm sure there's probably been some patients.
But
unknown, yes, exactly.
Okay, right
and
on.
Therefore, I haven't, to my knowledge, had any bed bugs.
Okay.
So,
cool.
Just saying, that was definitely one of the like trying times in my career that I still remember the moment when she said it out loud and it just like hit me, like just. Like nothing, no one else existed. I was like, what am I doing? Where are my hands going? Like, it was pretty dramatic.
Yeah, no, I hear it. Sounds like thankfully it wasn't too much of an exposure, especially if you didn't have to go. Because bed bugs in the back of an ambulance, like if you don't know, spraying alcohol is not gonna. I mean, it made you feel better, but it's not really gonna do much. Like to kill bed bugs, the service you currently work at, I used to work at, has like a superheater. You superheat the back to like 185 degrees or something.
Yeah, there's a whole
for like 12 plus hours to kill them. Decontamination.
Decontamination, yes. That word, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a simple thing. So like if you have, because I've had a couple times where we've had like in the ambulance, I know it's your story time, but kind of in the same vein, we had a guy at one of the a very shady hotel, right? If I said the name, you'd be like, oh,
Yes.
yeah.
I already know what you're talking about, yeah.
And so we get there, and fire was already there. Doors open. The patient's laying like in the doorway, and there's two people on the bed watching TV, totally like undisturbed with what's going on, not paying attention to us at all. As presumably their friend is laying on the ground.
Perfect.
And he's laying there pantsless.
Classic.
And so, we're talking to him, and he's pretty altered. He's pretty out of it. But so we get him up on the bed, and he had sweatpants laying next to him. I was just going to leave him there. I don't want to bring him with me.
Yeah.
But the fire guy picks him up. He's like, oh, you want to bring his pants? And I was like, fine. And he already grabbed him, I guess. And so he just like puts him on top of the patient, and it looks like there's a big blood stain on him. So, I was like, that's gross, whatever.
Yeah.
Just like a dark, big stain on him. And so we go to the hospital. We, we move the guy over, give a report to the nurse, and the nurse is like, is something moving? And what I thought was the blood stain was just a huge thing of bed bugs. And they were starting to crawl around off of the what we thought was, or maybe it was like a blood stain, maybe they're like eating the blood. I don't know what bed bugs do. But we were able to see the bed bugs moving around. So that was one, it was like 4:00 in the morning where we went home, and thankfully the supervisor was like, take your rig out of service.
Yeah.
We changed at the hospital. They gave us hospital scrubs. We went back. We like did double wash. We took showers, and thankfully, because we hadn't slept at all that night, the supervisor was like, you guys are done.
Yeah. You've had enough.
Take a shower. Wash your clothes, because we had extra clothes, and I always
bring an extra uniform.
Yeah, always bring an extra uniform. We could have gone back in service for like 2 hours before shift change, but he's like, go home, go to sleep.
That's the cherry on top. I think you've done enough.
Yeah. So it's definitely like when you have those exposures, I get the itchiness, but the worst thing, like, I don't want to bring that home.
No.
Like, the station's bad enough. No, but if I bring that to my house,
then you got to clean
fumigation and all that stuff, to really kill them.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's a whole process. Yeah, it's like the last thing I want to have to deal with.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm sure I would love to see, because obviously I know Allie pretty well.
Right.
Listeners of the podcast and know Allie, it's Wade's wife. Everyone knows Wade probably that watches the podcast too, and she's definitely. What you were saying is correct.
Yes.
Her affect can be interesting. So, and I say that if Allie's watching, I love Allie. She's great. She's a total sweetheart.
Yes.
But she definitely has that really like she'll murder you kind of vibe. And so I just imagine like her with bed bugs and her freaking out would have been a sight to see. That funny.
And I have to say, since then, I have been the little bird that she has taken under her wing. I think it was in that moment that she was like, okay, I got to give this one a chance. She's really helpless. Like,
she needs it. She
does need it. Yeah, she needs a little help. Yeah, she took pity on me, and since then we've become friends. So that's good.
So since then, I mean, normally the whole point is be like, oh, what have you learned since then about, and have you changed anything? But there's not really much you can change about that.
No. It's like, that's one of those things that I mean, sometimes you'll take a patient to the hospital and the nurses will be like, hey, by the way, we found bed bugs. Yeah. And then, your whole world spins after that. Yeah. Everything just kind of like, at least in my brain it does. I don't know about other people, but it's like, it's a tough moment for me.
Yeah. For me, it's more just resigned of like,
here we go again.
Because I've had like 3 exposures where I've had to go through the whole thing of we just don't know. Yeah. And then you find out the hospital later. Yeah. Mostly because I worked in the area where, the bed bugs would be more prevalent.
Right.
Maybe depending on your charting software system, we did find one patient had bed bugs because we were able to pull up their old charts, and when we looked at the history, it said bed bugs, and somebody had manually inputted bed bugs into the history. So maybe something
that's nice
if you
to
have
know.
the ability to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we would carry Tyvek suits to put around the patient to try to minimize the exposure. So just to keep those bed bugs on nice and with their home.
I remember there's some places that you would go to in general regions where you'd walk in and you'd be like, has there been a bed bug exposure in this facility? Yeah. Just so that way you would have an idea if there was. Okay, now I know what we need to do. Yeah.
Or a certain house even. I remember there was one house that was a known bed bug house that we would call fairly frequently, and we would know, like, unless somebody was dying, we're going to stand outside and be like, you're going to come out here. We're not going in there. Like, we're not bringing that home to my family.
And that, kids, is the importance of BSI PPE.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help that much realistically.
It doesn't. At least you have gloves on. Yeah.
Thinking about it.
Yeah.
Fun.
No, for real.
That's a good way to start off a nice EMS career.
I know. And since then, the fear of bed bugs has plagued me. I will say it has not left.
Yeah.
It has not left. And knock on wood, see, I'm speaking this into existence because the last podcast I was on, I had said I'd never been first on the chest for CPR.
Did that happen?
It did.
Good
this
for
last
you.
shift I worked, so I did actually get to feel the cartilage popping, but I spoke that into existence. So now I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I'm not speaking this into existence.
This is when we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, because I think I'd be okay with living out the rest of my career in EMS without having to deal with that.
Oh, for sure. I think everybody would.
Yeah.
Everybody would. Cool. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap it up here.
Sweet.
So
thanks for having me.
I wish many bed bugless shifts for you in the future and for the rest of your career.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll speak that into existence.
Yes,
like
good
you said.
vibes out there. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
We'll have you back soon. Thanks for sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you for
we'll
having me.
See you later.